This essentially, this one diagram, gives us a basis for understanding what personal growth and mental wellness is actually all about. We become grounded in life when we understand who we are. I mean, one of the greatest conundrums that some people carry right through life is not knowing who they are. Today, there are many groups, many organisations promoting a definition of identity that might not even necessarily serve them. I guess we know that we have identified and defined who we are well when we're no longer experiencing any degree of emotional turbulence in life. Emotional turbulence, I'm going to propose at this stage, is connected to the way in which we define ourselves on an identity level. Because what many people do is they look at who they perhaps were at some point in the past, and who they think they were at some point in the past might not necessarily have been who they actually were, but it might just have been how it was they were referred to by a friend, a so-called friend, or a school person, or a teacher, or a parent, or a family member. What I'm saying is, if you've ever heard the term that sticks and stones will break our bones, but names will never harm me, well, I would go as far as saying that the complete opposite is true. Sticks and stones can break our bones, but our bones can re-heal within about 6 to 7 weeks, based on what bones would break. But sometimes when people, undermine us or call us names or whatever, we can end up developing ideas about who it is that we actually are, that we can end up going through life carrying them as if these are universal facts for anything up to an entire lifetime. And it's this that, unfortunately, undermines many people in life. So when we can break free of all of the unhelpful terms that we might use to define ourselves, we break free and enter into the space where we can just simply be who we actually are. So this is what I'm going to propose personal growth is all about. Personal growth isn't about pumping up our biceps. It's not about just becoming more intellectually knowledgeable. It's actually about becoming clear on who we aren't, clearer on who we are, and then taking the action steps required towards becoming this person. When we start feeling like we are getting a little bit closer to being who we are, we no longer feel the need to prove ourselves or justify ourselves or explain ourselves or be accepted or validated by other people, but instead we become free just to simply live life on our terms, doing what we want to do, regardless of whether anyone else agrees or approves or not. It's a liberating stage of life to reach. So, I'm sharing this now just to give a little bit of context for one of the most fundamental, basic principles that Neuro-Linguistic Programming is based upon. What Richard Bandler and John Grinder first proposed around about 40 years ago when they initially conceptualized this body of ideas was that we live life in this constant state of flux. Now, what I mean by this is that we live life in the present, which the NLP term we use is present state. But because we're in this constant state of flux, we look to the future at who we aren't, at what we don't have, at what we want. And if it appears that what we want, i.e. our desired state, is going to be impossible or is light years away, we end up experiencing something emotional today that might not necessarily serve us. All right, so let's just take a few minutes here to look at the difference between present state and desired state, because when we understand this model, we can essentially begin to just understand where we're at in life. All right? I don't know if I'm speaking to a real person here. I do hope that I am. Now, I can only speak from my own experience here. Right? I go through seasons and stages of life. Sometimes I know where I'm at, I know where I've come from, I know where I'm going, and everything as well. Sometimes I know where I'm at, I've got a rough idea where I'm going, but I don't have the faintest idea where I've just come from. Sometimes I know where I've come from, I've got a relatively good idea where I'm going, but I don't have the faintest idea where I'm at. Can you relate? Sometimes we have no idea where we're going or what direction we want to direct the rest of our lives in. And this comes with all sorts of problems within itself. So the way in which we relate to how we perceive our future is going to be will determine how it is that we emotionally and mentally experience life today in the present. All right? All of this happens inside of our minds. So our present state is essentially how we experience life right here, right now. Now, the problem that many organisations and institutions have throughout society is they focus on mental health rather than mental wellness, and there is a big distinction. Think about the various mental health organisations in the world today, all right? What is it that they're here to address? Mental health disorders, mental health crises, mental health, emotional issues, disturbances, all this kind of thing, all right? And it's fine, it's a level of service. But neuro-linguistic programming centres itself around this idea that we have an opportunity to direct our focus and attention in any direction we want to in life. So we can choose to focus on what we don't want, which, how we would refer to this, is focusing on negative motivation. We focus more upon what we don't want than upon what we do want. So when we focus on what we don't want, we end up getting anxious or stressed out or worked up or whatever, thinking and looking at all these things that we don't want to be thinking about and looking at. Very, very practical here. But when we can discipline our mind and redirect our focus away from what we don't want, which is only ever going to be in present state, and towards what we essentially do want, positively framed goals, then how we start to experience life today in the present can completely transform. So how we experience life today will be determined by a number of factors. Our life history. Not just the events and the circumstances, the situations, the interpersonal interconnections that we've had, but then how we've interpreted them. All right? Are you aware that there are infinite number of ways that we can interpret every situation in life? Right? So the lens that many people look through is they look at who they are today as being a reflection of who they were back then. But think about it. You know, going back when you were 2 years old, is there anything that you've learned since then and here? Have you become smarter, stronger? Have you become wiser, a little bit smarter, a little bit sharper? Of course you have. Goes without saying. So it's not that we undermine ourselves on all levels in the present state, but it's generally our negative experiences that many people define themselves by. For example, I failed in the past, I failed in the past, I failed in the past, which means that today I'm a failure. In the past, these bad things happened to me, which means that I am something. This person rejected me. This person spoke down to me. I didn't get that role or that job that I wanted. I asked that guy, that girl out on the date. They said, no, that means that I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not lovable enough. I'm not all these things. All right, here, in my present state, and this makes me feel not so good. Right, so the options are, I can then go to the mental health organisation, hopefully they can do some techniques and fix me, or I can actually embark upon a journey of personal growth, working towards mental wellness through understanding myself deeply and more intimately from the inside out, and just seeing if I can actually take control of this process. Does this sound even remotely appealing to you? I do hope so. All right, because guess what? Many people go through life defining themselves by how they've been treated by other people. I am a victim. I am a trauma victim. I am this, I'm that. You've got no idea what's happened to me. But here's the thing. Are we what's happened to us? Are we how we feel? Or are we who we are? So essentially our present state, how we experience life today, will also be influenced by how content we are. How content are you? How fulfilled are you right now? What are you doing to fill this void in your life? If you aren't fulfilled, if you aren't content, is your lack of fulfillment or contentment someone else's responsibility? Or is it yours? Granted, these are some challenging questions. I understand, I fully appreciate. Are you who you think you are? Or do you have the capacity to become so much more? In what ways do you define yourself where you just put yourself in a box? In what ways do you define yourself that isn't even remotely accurate in terms of reflecting who you are? In what aspects of your life do you act in accordance with who other people think you should be? In what ways do you compromise your own integrity? In what ways are you really holding back from unleashing everything about who you actually are onto the world? Would you even be prepared to do this? What don't you know that you need to know today? What don't you understand about life that you would really benefit from understanding moving forward into your future if you want to live a more robust and rewarding life than the life you've lived up until now. All I'm doing is I'm asking a lot of questions. I'm here to spark your imagination, to get your head going just a little bit. Because these ideas, these questions are not asked culturally. This stuff ain't taught in school. It's commonly not taught in the workplace. Right? Just give you a little bit about me. You might be thinking, okay, so, what's this Scottish guy? Who is he? What's he done with his life? Well, I got into studying Neuro-Linguistic Programming and applied psychology around about 15 years ago. Why? To understand myself. My background wasn't always teaching NLP or applied psychology. My background was the military. I had a 10-year military background, first and foremost. I then spent around about 6 or 7 years in sales, business development and marketing. And it was by my mid-20s, I started to realise that, how I experience life today sucks. I was not having a lovely, happy time. No, I'd spent many years, in the pursuit of happiness, and I hadn't found it. So I started asking different questions. I'd spent all these years travelling the world, especially after leaving the military, looking for quick fix techniques. I've been there, I've done it. I've chanted the mantras. I've done all the various techniques. I've spent thousands on the guru training courses. And it was kind of like, it was fine in the moment, but it's like many fleeting things. Stuff comes, stuff goes. So unless I was continuing to financially invest time, money, energy, effort into those various products and techniques and processes and self-help resources, I just found I kept on coming back to this sticking point. Yes, I was feeling differently for a season or for a spell, but nothing was essentially changing until I learned the lesson, until I saw for myself that we actually have a choice. We can commit and devote our lives to trying to feel better, or we can commit and devote our lives to growing and becoming more. And this is a big one. This is a big one, and I hope that you can see this soon enough. Because many people go through life defining themselves by who they think they are. I spent many years of my life defining myself as a failure, as this, as that, as the next thing. Today, I've not just gone on to understand this stuff, and today I don't just teach NLP, but I've actually, been happily married for close to a decade, built a couple of multi-million pound businesses in the process, teaching people how to move forward in life, because these principles don't just relate to mental wellness and personal growth, they relate to organizational growth, leadership effectiveness, family health, pretty much anything you can think of pursuing in your lifetime. The principles are universal. When we understand and learn how to build and base our life upon a foundation of principles, we start to build strong and extremely robust lives. What does it look like not to be living a robust, strong life? Those people who live life on this emotional up and down roller coaster. Instability becomes their best friend. So, present state is all about my perceived reality today. It's essentially how I feel about myself. So when people live life on a happiness quest, i.e. looking to feel happy, I'm certainly not undermining this, I'm just saying there's a more effective strategy we can take towards living life effectively. What some people end up doing is going round and round and round in circles. I'm going to take a new book, I'm going to try and have a new experience, I'm going to travel the world, I'm going to change my situation, change my circumstances, change the people in my life, change a career, develop some new habits, do the next deep breathing technique or process. I'm going to speak to some gurus, I'm going to take some more programs, all for the purposes of just simply feeling better. And some people spend their whole life going round and round and round and round in these circles. Can you relate? If not to you, can you identify someone else in your life who might be stuck in this perpetual loop? What's the alternative? Well, the alternative is, instead of looking at how we feel about our lives today in present state, we define and we determine what our desired state is. i.e., we just take ownership for how it is that we actually want to experience life. That cannot just be an emotional sensation. It needs to be centered around accomplishment and growth within our own self-identity. So we develop a meaningful vision for our lives, what we want to go on to accomplish. If we want to make a level of impact in our societies, in our family, in our organizations, in our workplace, in your religious group. It might be the case you want to go on to become the next president or prime minister. Well, the only person who's stopping you from pursuing these pipe dreams is you. There's no one or nothing getting in your way, just a way in which you relate to yourself. This is a beautiful thing about life. So when we learn how to set compelling goals, objectives, they become a meaningful vision that we can really start being positively motivated by. Rather than focusing on what we don't want, our focus becomes transfixed upon what we do want. Very, very different, all right? What would happen for you today if you stopped looking at everything that isn't working about your life and instead transfix your focus towards what you want and what you're willing to do about it? I guarantee things might change for you quite rapidly. El rapido, as we say here in Scotland. So who can we become? Or who can you become? Are you perfect already? Are you already got there? Is your identity fixed? Or is there room for improvement and growth? To give you, an indication here. Am I the perfect communicator? Am I the perfect teacher? Far from it. Just in case you have any doubts, I can boldly disclose that I am not the perfect teacher. I am not the best teacher in the world. I am not the greatest NLP expert in the world. I most certainly am not the most handsome man in the world. Am I okay with these things? Yes, I am. Which means that I'm okay just committing to the process of personal growth and becoming more. Because even if you're not okay with my communications right now, they will improve over time. Because I'm committed to the process. Not perfect. I'm just in the process of becoming permanently better. And this is an outcome of life that I can only define as being liberating, completely liberating. No longer matters what other people think of us because we know that we are working towards becoming more and doing better. Interesting perspective. So we start asking questions. What could I go on to achieve? If it is actually possible for me to accomplish anything that I want to in life, but when we get clear on a vision, on a set of strategic goals, objectives, what we actually want to accomplish with our life, and also who we can become, we start looking towards the legacy that we might even leave behind with our lives. What it is that we might go on to be remembered by. Some people say they don't care. Some people say that it's irrelevant. I would say that it's massively relevant if you want to experience life in a rewarding, meaningful way today. All right, so be prepared to have your mind changed, all right? Because this is essentially what growing and developing is all about. It's about us being willing to give up the preconceived notions that we've already embraced about how life is, about who we are, about what's right, about what's wrong. Many of these ideas, it's not like they're even necessarily just concepts that we've arrived at through our own volition. Instead, many of these ideas, our perspective about what's right, what's wrong, actually just got passed over onto us from parents or guardians or friends or social circles. So what I'm saying is that neuro-linguistic programming actually allows us to understand and reprogram our own minds by ourselves, objectively, free from input from other people. All right, I'm not telling you here how to live life in the most effective way. I'm going to offer you some ideas. You get to decide whether you embrace them, whether you accept them, whether you reject them, or whatever. Your life is essentially your responsibility. I can point you in a useful direction in which to look, but it's entirely up to you whether you commit to looking in this direction. So our desired state is essentially the ideal that we aspire to in life. This becomes and gives us what we would refer to as a self-concept. A state of existence that we can actually commit the rest of our life to working towards, something that we actually want. Because once we have constructed this vision for our futures, then all that's left for us to do is essentially get moving. And as we get moving, we start feel like we're making progress, we start feeling fulfilled, we start feeling content, because we can identify that what we're essentially doing is moving away from the desired state, the present state that we used to be in that wasn't fulfilling for us, and we can see that we're actually starting to get closer to becoming who we want to be and accomplishing what it is that we want to achieve.